do is kill ourselves Crips when all we do is kill Crips. That's why we turn criminals. That's why we turn criminals.
Welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales. I decided that I'm going to go back to the Pacific Northwest and cover a story about the Hoovers out of Portland. When I did the Portland video, that case was not adjudicated yet, so I didn't want to talk a lot about it. However, now that the first phase is over, I could discuss it, hopefully without any cops getting mad at me. But before I get to that specific case, 74th and Hoover became a stronghold for the gang, and it also became very strong around the King County, Seattle area, as well as the Portland, Oregon area. I will get more into Seattle, King County Hoovers in a different episode, because as I said, this episode will focus on the Portland, Oregon Hoover RICO cases. Let's go a little bit back in time. It appears the Hoovers hit the Portland, Oregon area in the 1980s. Maybe some of you listeners out there remember when they hit town. But it's my understanding that there were some unthanked park hustlers who were local set that became Bloods. And believe it or not, they had an alliance with Hoovers. And this alliance was called Hoov Thanks. My understanding that the Hoov Thanks even generated a hit list. The Hoovers also had an alliance with a few Inglewood family Bloods in the Portland area. The IFBs are originally out of Inglewood, California, who rallied against Rolling 60s and Kirby Block Crips. Joseph Jojo Allen pled guilty on the first day of his trial for murder after a witness identifying him as being the person who shot 14-year-old Devontae Lightfoot once in the back of the head. Lightfoot was a Kirby associate, while Allen was a Hoover. Allen was soon sentenced to 18 years in prison, with no possibility of time off for good behavior. Edward Padden was killed in March of 2013 at 60th and Killingsworth. The Failing Street gang was convicted in that case, but they are Hoover allies. This is not the first RICO case for Portland street gangs. I believe there was a case against the Bloods in the 1990s and a case against the Rolling 60s in 2010. But this more recent Hoover RICO case resulted in the seizure of 44 firearms, a lot of dope, 38 indictments for Hoovers or Hoover associates, murder cases, drug trafficking charges, sex trafficking, and felon in possession of a firearm are just examples of some of the charges. Two of the main targets were Lorenzo Lowdown Jones and Ronald Big Fly Rhodes, who were considered to be leaders of local Portland Hoovers that had been active on the streets for many years. Rhodes ended up being convicted of the fatal shooting of an individual named Kyle Polk in southeast Portland on December 16, 2015. Although Rhodes didn't pull the trigger, prosecutors successfully argued that his accomplice, Javier Hernandez, then age 19, did the shooting after Rhodes gave him a gun, telling him to shoot, and then drove away with him. My understanding that Hernandez wanted to please his boss, so he did as he was told. The prosecutor stated that Lorenzo Jones was not only the leader of a violent street gang, he was also recruiting and grooming kids on the streets of Portland to carry out violent acts on behalf of this gang. Thus, he was often referred to as being a shot caller. Lorenzo Lowdown Jones was convicted of one of two homicides he was charged with. He was found guilty in the September 17, 2017 fatal shooting of Wilbert Billy Butler in southeast Portland, but the jury found him not guilty in the July 19, 1998 fatal shooting of Asensio Garcia, who also died in southeast Portland. It was pretty much us against everybody, said one witness, Rusty Reen, who I had at the King County Jail at one time. Hoovers are often described as being EBKs, everybody killers, because they often don't get along with Crips or Bloods. Ronald Rhodes was sentenced to life in federal prison, plus 10 years and 5 years supervised release. Lorenzo Lowdown Jones also received life without in federal prison.
The Hoover gang has been in Portland for decades, but we wanted to know, who are these people, how they've been affecting our community throughout the years.
Our Valina Jones is digging deeper now into that, and she joins us live. What are you learning tonight, Valina?
Jennifer and Jeff, this gang has a long and dangerous history throughout the state, dating back to attempted murder back in the 80s. Now, while there is still a long way to go, both federal and state officials say they're working to get all gangs off of our streets.
Today, we're making the community safer.
The state's mission, taking down the Hoover gang one member at a time.
This indictment lays out 3 identified murders, 7 attempted murders, multiple gun seizures, and the trafficking of methamphetamine, heroin, and cocaine.
The Hoovers, born in Los Angeles, have ties throughout the West Coast, some members calling Portland home since the 80s. The U.S. State Attorney announcing 3 of those gang members are now facing federal racketeering and murder charges.
They pride themselves on being everybody killers, EBK standing for that everybody killers, to symbolize their lethality in our community.
The gang has a long history in Portland.
From the onset of their violent initiations to always use force in the form of retaliation and have that cycle unfold in our community.
That retaliation seen in the 2014 murder of Urvea Herring, where 6 Hoover gang members were charged in her death. Court records show the shooting was in retaliation after a fight between the Hoover and Woodland Park Bloods gangs. Herring's mom spoke during the sentencing of one of the men.
Every time he had been in the courtroom, he smirked and smiled. It's like when he was walking in, smiling. He has no remorse for what he has done to me and my family.
As more of their members rack up charges, the state is putting the gang on high alert.
So a simple message to gang members in Oregon is wake up, stop the violence. You will be held accountable.
In addition to Jones and Rhodes, who took their case all the way to trial, there were 38 defendants in total. The rest just pled out, as they didn't want to risk life in federal prison. Some of the agencies that did a great job were the FBI, the Portland Police Bureau, in particular the Gang Unit, the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, both deputies and jail intel that were not involved in the corruption I mentioned, the Gresham Police Department, the ATF, Homeland Security Investigations, Eugene Police, and the Oregon State Police Forensic Service Division. This particular RICO case was prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Oregon and was part of the Project Safe Neighborhoods, which is a program with the Department of Justice for violence and crime reduction efforts. Also, just recently, a federal grand jury charged 4 more Hoover gang members in the murder of a Portland man back in 2020 under the VCAR, Violent Crimes in Aid of Racketeering Activity, also known as the RICO. According to the Department of Justice, Tazon Kelly, Anthony Bagsby, and Delane Roy, all of Portland, as well as Coco Taplin of Fairview, were pinned with multiple charges in the fatal shooting of a 23-year-old man named Dakir Karim Masir, who was shot and killed on December 11, 2020, while he was driving an Uber in Woodlawn Park, Blood territory. This case was also gang-related. I believe today there's approximately a dozen active Crip and Blood sets that are broken up into smaller cliques, usually based on age. In 1998, Portland police estimated that more than 2,500 youth and adults were involved in gangs. Many of them had come up during the crack cocaine epidemic. As I've stated previously, I'm not sure of the current numbers in Portland, as many people want to downplay the gang problem. I believe there has been some good prevention intervention efforts, but much more needs to be done. As most of you know, I worked for over 30 years in corrections at multiple institutions, all the way from corrections officer to classification supervisor to being a lieutenant. And I'm sad to say, but there are some corrupt officers working in corrections. I talked a little bit about it on the Green Wall video concerning corrupt officers in California. And my buddy Hector Bravo speaks about it a lot on his channel, that Prison Guards. It's found out during these gang cases that Oregon State Police investigated corruption at the Multnomah County Corrections Jail in Portland, and it let loose a bombshell 142-page report showing a pattern of misconduct involving at least 6 current and former deputies. It was alleged that jail deputies did favors for members of the Hoover gang, including running drugs, bringing in contraband, buzzing inmates into cells so they could beat up inmates that officers had problems with, and other unprofessional acts. The report gave a picture that the jail was basically ran by the Hoovers. In fact, to state that 2 deputies even became so close to Hoovers that they named gang monikers and honorary membership in the Hoovers. But once again, although there are some bad apples, I would say 90% of officers are good. Although some gang members say it's the other way around, 90% are bad, and all cops are bastards. Usually that's about 5% or less. There's also another 5% that are lazy and incompetent. But I gotta say that I've had pretty good dealings with most offenders. I showed them respect, and they showed me respect. It's all about respect. You can find more information about the Portland Hoovers and many other gangs in my book, Gangster's Paradise, Gangs in the Pacific Northwest. And with that, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.